and anger at the continuing overcrowding crisis in our hospitals. And Taoiseach, this morning we see that the number of patients awaiting admission is again at near record levels. Some 472 patients were in trolleys in emergency departments or wards this morning. And for the third day in a row, Our Lady of Lourdes Hospital in Drogheda has the highest number of citizens on trolleys. It's clear that the government is not providing adequate resources. So picture the scenario, Taoiseach. A patient presents at a hospital. They are ill. A clinical decision is taken to admit them. But government policy prevents them from receiving proper medical attention. It denies them. Government policy denies them admission. Instead, they're left for several hours or days on a chair or a trolley. So, Taoiseach, could I invite you to go unannounced to Our Lady of Lourdes Hospital in Drogheda, or indeed to any other hospital? See for yourself the challenges being presented by committed health workers. See for yourself the indignities being inflicted upon patients and their families. Perhaps, Taoiseach, take the time to visit a ward from which patients have been clinically discharged, but they can't be sent home because it isn't safe to send them home because they are denied the services they require, again as a result of government policy. So the fact is, Taoiseach, that your government has decided that this is the price that our people have to pay for your austerity policies. Meanwhile, last year you paid $7.5 billion in debt interest, including private banking debt. So, Taoiseach, will you accept that you cannot and will not tackle the overcrowding crisis in our hospitals while you pursue these brutal austerity policies?
Taoiseach?
No, I don't accept your assertion at all. The government are acutely aware of the challenges and the difficulties that are faced here in the health service. That's why 650 million extra was put into the system for 2015. And that's why the Minister set up a specific unit to deal with the emergency department trolley numbers, of which there were 400 this morning at 8 a.m, and that obviously will decline during the course of the day. Now, emergency unit group met on the 2nd of February to look at the strategy of how you can actually deal with this. We know that in Drogheda, for instance, there's an acute shortage of beds in the locality for dealing with delayed discharges from the hospitals themselves. This is one factor that feeds into it. I listened to an eminent medic this morning saying that, government sort of say, well, it'll be all right on the day. We've had this for years. The fact of the matter is that government take it very seriously. It's not in the best interest of anybody to have anybody on trolleys, but particularly elderly people, and I've had first-hand evidence myself of going into wards and emergency departments, and thank you for the invitation. But the fact is that, for instance, in the case of Our Lady of Lourdes, funding was approved for a particular build at Drogheda to include a 12-bed surgical assessment unit and a clinical decision unit, which will open in April of this year. The acute medical assessment unit is open 24/7 for direct access from GP referrals up there. It's increasingly making use of relationships with other hospitals in the Louth Meath group to distribute work and opportunity more appropriately. There are 15 transitional care beds were identified this week, and 5 patients were discharged this week to date. Drogheda will be the next hospital to benefit from the Irish Hospital Redesign Programme. A new hospital manager has been advertised for. Our Lady of Lourdes joined the RCSI hospital group and will benefit from that networking and that reconfiguration in the nearby hospitals between Connolly, Beaumont, Cavan, Monaghan and Dundalk. It's recently been collaborating with the private sector to accelerate exit of long-term care patients with 24 beds expected to come on stream by the end of this month. And Our Lady of Lourdes have implemented fully the improvement plan agreed with HICWA as part of the special measures since 2012. I'd like to say the Minister for Health asked for cooperation from frontline staff and from medical personnel, and I want to thank them for that cooperation. This is an issue that needs to be managed in a way that will bring about a reduction in what we see in emergency departments and on trolleys in corridors and hospitals. But it's not something, Deputy, that can be fixed overnight. So I just want you to understand that government don't have endless resources here. If it was a question of money, it would have been fixed years ago. It's an issue that does arise on a regular basis, and it's a case of being able to manage it effectively in the interests of the patients. And that's going to be, the priority for government, and that's why the special unit dealing with emergency departments and trolleys will continue to meet and access wherever beds are available, so that delayed discharges can be out there and the pressure can be released on the hospitals. And again, I thank the medical personnel for the cooperation.
Deputy Adams.
Taoiseach, I think sometimes you should listen to what you say. You said it's not in the best interest of anyone to have patients on trolleys. You don't need to tell me that, or indeed anybody else, particularly the families of these patients. You said that there were 400 patients on trolleys this morning. There were 472. You said there's a new module unit being opened up at Our Lady of Lourdes, and there is. But last week there was no commitment for staff, particularly nursing staff, for that unit. You said they're trying to find beds for patients who have been clinically discharged. At the same time, you closed the Cottage Hospital, and you have yet to honour the commitment on St Joseph's in RD. I Taoiseach, last month, I crossed this floor and gave you a letter that I received from HICWA, in which they pointed out that the 2012 Toller Report recommendations had not been implemented. And they said that if these recommendations had been implemented, current risks would be significantly reduced for patients. They also said that they told the Department of Health this, and that they told the HSE this. They said all of this in very, very clear language publicly and in correspondence. Now, it is the explicit responsibility of the Department of Health and the Minister of Health to take prompt action to implement HICWA recommendations. And when I asked you why the Minister of Health had failed to implement these recommendations, you failed to answer me. You promised, when I give you the letter, to write to me. You never did. I'm still awaiting a letter from you dealing with this core issue, that HICWA says if its recommendations had been honoured, this risk would be significantly reduced. So can you tell, Tommy Cricknahan, can you tell us, Taoiseach, why? Can you explain to the Dáil why the HSE, why the Department for Health, why the Health Minister, in the face of this ongoing crisis, have failed to implement HICWA's recommendations on patient safety in our hospitals?
Taoiseach? I've made the point that government put over 600 million extra into the health budget this year. It does take time for that spend to filter out in terms of treatment for patients and facilities for people. Yes. Now, I'm surprised that you didn't get a letter back from me. I'll see that you get it today. Yes.
Thank you. Deputy Fleming.
I'll answer your questions in your letter. Surprised.
Deputy Fleming, please. Thank you.
Thank you.